I want to thank everybody for joining us again today. Hopefully, you had a chance to join yesterday, or maybe tune in and catch the recording, or review some of the notes from yesterday. Um, my colleague John Cole was able to highlight some of the material over across the pond, as they say, over in the UK. And so, if you had a chance to join that time zone yesterday, thanks for joining. And we're looking forward to digging into things that we may have touched base on a little bit yesterday in a little bit more granular detail. And this is something that I think um, I would guess that if you're attending today, that there will be things that you observe or see today that will probably surprise you in a very positive manner. Mainly from the standpoint of, I think a lot of the things that are really exciting that we'll show you today, they're relatively unknown, and I think that there's probably something living in your dashboard right now that you're going to go, "Wow, I can't believe that that's available," and that's something that I can go and start using as a part of Ezoic, and I hope that that's the case. And yeah, that's why I have my colleague here, Gerald, joining me.
Good morning.
So Gerald, I'm a marketer by trade, so I'm going to be the one that's I like to be a little hyperbolic, but you're a data scientist, and so we kind of lean into that quite a bit today.
I am. Yes, I'm usually the person they keep in the back of the stage rather than put me
We hide you
in front of
away.
the stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your background, and yeah, what is data science, and how long have you been doing it? What's your background like?
Sure. So I've been a software engineer for a good part of my life. I worked with various companies building search engines for various markets around the world: France, Spain, the US, the UK, Turkey, Russia, etc. And I came to data science because, as part of building search engines, there were a number of things that we were struggling to do, coding manually,
Yeah.
understanding the meaning of queries and things like that. And then about 2013 or 14, we started using machine learning. And I was like, this is magic. But there is no magic. So there must be, how come software engineer or the machine learning can do things that we've been struggling to do in code? And so I basically veered to data science at that point.
There is a quote, and I can't remember if they're referring to science or programming, but it's that good programming or good science is nearly indistinguishable from magic.
That's wasn't that the C. Clarke
Yeah,
saying?
yeah. And I think that's I find that that's more and more true all the time. And I think that as you work in a field, it's interesting because sometimes I think that you can sort of be in this innovation, and you can sometimes not have the same vision as somebody that maybe doesn't know all the things that can hold you up and all the things that can kind of go wrong with that. And here more recently, speaking of all the different things that can go wrong, SEO, what a crazy industry, what a crazy space. And this is something that you've really put a lot of time and energy into over the last few years in terms of really diving into what it means for publishers like those that are on the call today. And yeah, I guess first, what would you say about just SEO in general, the space?
So I came to SEO from the standpoint of, I'm building a search engine. How do I pick the most relevant search results to show the end user? Right? So a little bit in the Google seat, even though I was not working for Google at the time. The SEO is really about having useful content. And I know people have heard that 50,000 times, but if you write good content, the search engine will want to put it forth to the end user.
So I hear, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people on the call that can relate to that sort of sentiment of, writing great content for an audience. It's something we talk about a lot. And so, that is the general, that's the direction that both Google and, in the best interest of the publishers and the audience, that's the perfect marriage, right? That the content, the intention is that it's good. And so why do we need SEO?
because there are another 1,000 publishers trying to write content that's as good as yours and covering the topics that you're currently covering, and there's only 10 spots at the top. So you're trying to compete to get there.
And I love that idea of, and I'm gonna actually just bump your mic a little bit closer.
A little bit closer. Okay.
There we go. And I think that one of the things that, and it's one of the reasons why we, I think we're going to show some tools and some technologies today that'll be that are badly needed. And I think we're going to have some publishers on today that are going to be really excited about some of what we're able to show them. And I think the reason why is because SEO in my mind is always not necessarily about how do you game a search engine, or how do you trick a search engine, or give it the things that it wants so that your content can rank the highest. I do think that perception is out there, but I've always thought of it as the analysis of what is good content that the majority of people want. So people come to a search engine to find content. How do I make sure that I am optimizing my content for what it is that they're looking for? And I think it sounds like a little turn of a phrase difference, but the fundamental sort of underlying things that you do about that, to me, are different. And that is sort of like the data science approach, the analyst, the researcher portion as to researching your content, as opposed to maybe dirty word that we use around here, keywords,
Yeah, well, keywords are what people use to find content. So you cannot just shove it away. You have to do with it, because that's what people use to access your content. So, yep.
Yeah, and I think if we start to kind of dive in now, we're going to be talking a lot today about AI. We talked about it a lot yesterday as well. And so SEO is going to change a lot, I would imagine, with the advent of AI. And, we had a chance to, hopefully everybody that's on today was able to get some of the info from yesterday. If not, obviously I'm Tyler. We just got done introing Gerald, who is a data scientist here at Ezoic, and one of the leading minds behind one of the tools that we're going to show you today, and we alluded to yesterday. But one of the things that I think when you start thinking about AI and you start thinking about like what is the next generation of content on the web going to look at or look like, it kind of comes back to this like phrase that I feel like we hear once a year, which is like, is SEO dead? We were kind of just on the subject, but how is AI really? Is it going to basically take all the strategies and techniques of SEO over the last 10 years, and are they basically just going to go away?
It's not necessarily dying, as you say here. And I think anybody who would try to tell you, oh, it's going to play out this way, they're either fooling themselves or they're trying to fool you for some benefit of some kind. There are still so many pieces that are moving. Google is moving very cautiously toward AI-assisted answers. They've not deployed it at scale yet. We don't know the ratio of answers that will be completely generated with AI. We don't know how much of backlinking to the publishers they're going to do. So the things are changing. I think we're living a real transition, and exactly how it's going to play out, I wish I could see 5 years from now to get a better idea.
Me too. And if there's one thing I'm sure about, it's that whatever I imagine that is going to look like is probably going to be different than that. And I think, one of the things that does, we are getting a little bit more clarity on this. And it's something that you and I were talking about this yesterday, and I thought it was a really interesting concept. But how has AI changed sort of, I guess, the quote unquote, the safety of evergreen content, which was for the longest time, if you could find good evergreen content, that was sort of like the gold standard. You could just have passive income from that content. But how is AI maybe shifting that?
I think evergreen content is exposed. The more plain vanilla content you have, the more exposed you are, because if you can ask, say, ChatGPT, write an article about how to cut the claws of my dog, and it gives you a 700 word about the tools and things like that. You don't need a publisher to publish that content, because the next a year from now, people will go to Google and say, how do I cut my dog's claws? They're going to get the answer generated. So if it's an answer you can generate just like that, that content is going to be produced by an AI, not by you.
And I find it really interesting because you can start to think of content like that. And this is something that I think if you've attended some of our webinars or listened to one of the podcasts that I do, one of the things that we talk about a lot is, trying to move away from having commodity content, or if you do have commodity content, have an advantage against the competitors, something that you alluded to earlier. But what is it that SEO has done to evergreen content with AI in terms of, the content being a commodity? What really changes that in terms of, why would that be different with AI as opposed to, the way that things were before? I guess, is it the sheer number of competitors?
I think it's something like that. So we tried to get AI to produce content that looked like it was produced by a human, right? So it's not about the fact that the content is produced. It's about the fact that the cost of producing content about a year ago went to zero.
Yeah.
Essentially, which means that anybody can generate. Imagine you have commodity like wheat, for example. Imagine you produce too much wheat one year, right? The price of wheat is going to go down. So the wheat that you have in your field, you're not going to be selling it as much as you did the previous year because there's too much on the market. Yeah. Well, that's what's going to happen what's happening with content. There's too much content of the same thing on the market, so it's going to dilute where the ads go. It's going to dilute where the eyeballs go, and so you're going to get a smaller share of the pie.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that now, right? And I know that those that are on the call can probably relate to this, but the internet didn't have enough content before, right? It's not like it was just filled with articles that the vast majority saw no traffic. And so I think this exacerbates an existing problem, but it speaks to the point that I think you brought up at the very beginning, which is that, SEO is really the art and the science of being able to figure out, how do I outcompete the other sort of realistically content of whatever form or fashion, that people want. And I think,
how do I get a little bit ahead? Yeah.
And so ideally, if this were me and this were my site, we're friends. So I would say, Gerald, hey, come help me out here, because that's essentially what you want, is you want somebody that can do deeper analysis and research and kind of guide you. Yeah. But are the things that you would do today, are those things going to be different in the future in terms of, or I guess maybe even looking into the past, or the things that maybe you would do as a data scientist from an SEO perspective different, in the next 2 or 3 years than what they maybe were 2 or 3 years ago?
The process is not necessarily the same. The process is essentially the same, but the tools I'm going to use are not necessarily the same. If we look at the typical flow where you have a content strategy, so you have an idea of what you want to talk about, what audience you want to target, and things like that, and then you want to find content ideas around that, write the content, you publish, and then you monitor the performance of your content and try to sense where your audience is going. So that doesn't change. But if you haven't done it already, I would encourage you to have a talk with ChatGPT about your content strategy overall, right? Ask it, I'm interested in dog grooming. I have my niche website on dog grooming, right? What's important about dog grooming? And maybe you're going to find that people are interested in the well-being of their dog and the health of their dog. So now you can think, okay, I'm writing this article about cutting dog claws. How do I tie that to the fundamental worries or interests of my audience? What does it do in terms of having the opportunity to build a closer relationship with my dog? because I'm caring for it, right?
Yeah.
And so on. So it's all of those different steps. You do them, but you have to find an original slant on producing content. So it's not just about cutting claws, but it's about how that's going to bring you closer to your dog at the same time.
And I think one of the things you brought up that I really liked is this idea of using it to have a deeper understanding of your audience. And this is something that I've come to realize here more recently. But one of the downsides that I think many website publishers have is that they're kind of robbed of their direct audience connection in the way that oftentimes creators or YouTubers or social media influencers are. And that, you know, if you have a YouTube video that you put up, your audience is there in the comments for good or for bad, you know? And you have this direct connection. You know what your audience is going to like. But a lot of website publishers, most of their traffic comes from organic search. And so there's this sort of like veil between you and your audience where it's like, you know, if you get a lot of traffic, it's like, okay, well, my audience must like it because, you know, that's Google is trying to figure that out. Yeah. But you don't necessarily have that direct connection to the audience. There's True. One step removed. And I like the idea of using SEO as sort of a back channel for better understanding the audience. And so you mentioned the content going to zero earlier and, you know, the cost of content. Yeah. And so I guess, I mean, the first question is, does having a reduction in the cost to produce content, does that directly affect the value of it? Is content going to be worth a lot less into the future?
I think it creates a hyper competitive environment where anybody and everybody can try to take a bit of your pie. Again, that I'll globally split the publishers into two groups. There are the ones who have a hobby or a side hustle, and the ones who depend on their the end of the month bills. They need to pay it, right? So
that's the job.
And so the side hustles, they have nothing to lose. They can try to step into your territory. Now they can produce tons of content for a very affordable fee, and so those are going to be gnawing at your legs, basically, at your publisher legs, right?
Yeah.
And then you have a brand to protect. You have a certain style and aesthetic that you wanna preserve because that's what your audience has come to like, and that's why they come back to your website. And so you feel threatened, but at the same time you're like, well, I cannot just jump in the bandwagon and change too many things because I don't know if that's going to stick or not. And so I think that's a big a big challenge for established publishers.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern that I think I've definitely noticed in talking to publishers, and I think that's probably the thing that is probably the most important to understand is that content it's not that the value of the content is going to be affected from the standpoint of the value to the end user, maybe even the value to something like an advertiser. It's that the value could be eroded by competition. And sometimes competition can drive the price of something up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier to extract that value. Thinking specifically as a publisher here. Yeah. And so I think that leads us into something that, it's something that you're very familiar with. This is really, in a lot of ways, it's something that, you've poured a lot of the time and energy that you've done in sort of like understanding everything in SEO and put it into a tool. And I think that's what we're going to show people today. So tell us a little bit more about Niche IQ and why we built it the way that we built it.
So I'll just state the fact that there are a lot of the things that go into Niche IQ that are basically lessons or knowledge or expertise from two great SEO specialists that we have here at Ezoic. I'm thinking of Robert and Zach. I know you had Zach.
We had Zach on the Publisher Lab podcast.
So they're just insanely knowledgeable. And all I'm trying to do in my humble way is to say, can I just cut a little bit of your brain and put it in a place where it's scalable? Because you have limited bandwidth, right? And so several of the tools we have here are basically the result of having a conversation with Zach or having a conversation with Robert, saying, oh, I could automate that, right? And I could just give you the finished product. And so the intention with Niche IQ is not to give you something that looks like an airplane cockpit with 50,000 different dials and numbers, but to give you something that's directly simple and actionable. So we still have the complexity underneath, but we aim at giving you kind of the finished product, right? So that you can play the role of the editor-in-chief, and you're not about spending 3 hours tweaking through keywords and then sorting the list in different ways and copying to another spreadsheet. You're just like, okay, we're going to do this one, we're going to do this one, and we're going to do this one this week.
Yeah, and I liken it to sort of like the executive experience where, I think you don't necessarily want an employee to come up and tell you, or a staff member to come up and tell you, here's a bunch of metrics. Mm-hmm. What would you like me to do? Out of context, it's like, if you know exactly what those metrics might mean, or if they're good or bad or relative to what, it's kind of helpful, and then you can maybe guide and direct them. But it's much better if they come and they tell you the metrics and say, I think those numbers are low, we should do X, Y, or Z. It allows you to make a lot more, conscious decision, because sometimes you might just be like, well, no, I have a different approach that I'm going to take. But you need to know that information, because you need to know the value of the risk that you're taking and what that risk might be. And it's always nice to have some wisdom. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into, we're actually going live now. And I think we'll share your screen, Gerald, and we'll have a better idea of sort of exactly how some of this works. And like I mentioned at the start of this webinar, I think, okay. Hopefully the folks at home are paying attention, because I think that there's some things here that are living in the dashboard that they are going to be surprised that are available and excited to start using. So as we kind of get onto, okay, all right, great. So this is the Niche IQ dashboard, and it's right inside of the Ezoic dashboard, right? So if you're an Ezoic user, you can go right in. There's a tab there.
Go share, right?
What'd you say?
I think I need to go share, actually. Yes. So, share. Here we go. So that's the dashboard, yes.
Yes, so perfect. So right there inside of the Niche IQ dashboard, you can log into your Ezoic account. You can go to the Niche IQ tab. So it brings you here. So the very first thing that I noticed is topics. Why topics instead of keywords? I mentioned before, like the idea of like, keywords is not a word that we necessarily love here. I should probably preface it, say I don't love it. Mm-hmm. And this is just my personal preference, but I think when you start thinking of things in keywords, that's whenever you start getting very disconnected from the audience and what it is you're trying to provide, which is, if you're a publisher, your content is your product, and mm-hmm. Your product is what you make for your customer. And so I prefer the idea of topics, because I think it kind of paints it in this light of what type of product are you making. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about, what is topics to Niche IQ? And
so there are 100 different ways you can ask for something. Typically, you could have a keyword that say sports shoes, buy sports shoes. And so those are the keywords that people will type into their Google search engine. There are several steps we do in normalizing and grouping those into topics, which is basically meant to be one level up from the actual 50 different ways you can ask for the same thing.
So whenever we're in Niche IQ, so walk me through. So topic suggestions. So how does Ezoic, or how does Niche IQ know which topics are good topics for my site?
The same way, I guess, traditionally publishers have done it. You look at keywords you rank well for in your Google Search Console or some other device. Then you go into the search engine and you type those keywords. And then you look at what other sites besides the YouTube and the Wikipedia are competing for those keywords. And then you go to those websites and you try to look at what else they talk about that you might not have covered. And that gives you some ideas about things that maybe you would cover. So it does that, but it does it at scale. So typically we consider not 15 competitors, but we'll consider 1,000 competitors.
So that's something really interesting. So I wanted to go and ask you about that. So the competitors list. So we'll start there. We'll kind of work backwards through these tabs. And so why so many competitors? I mean, and then why is YouTube, is Wikipedia, are those things relevant? So why this number of competitors? And yeah, what's the approach?
Well, we don't mean to hide anything. So we could go and filter all the big gorilla that you will never compete against, but knowing that you're actually competing against it is a data point. So
Yeah.
as a data scientist, I think I don't want to hide anything.
Well, you absolutely would want to know that too, right?
Yeah.
If
it might give you other ideas. You're like, wow, I compete with YouTube for 15% of the keywords that are considered. Maybe I should do more videos. Q to some of the products we have, Flickify or Unix. But anyway, my point is, it's there. It's in your face, right? You asked why so many competitors. You can see on the right the overlap ratio. You typically overlap very little with your competitors.
That's what I was going to say, that I noticed looking at a lot of different sites, was that I was surprised to see that the overlap rate, when you look at 1,000 competitors, it's, the difference between maybe somebody that's your, 100th competitor and your third competitor, the percentage of overlap is not all that different.
No, it might be different at the which of the keywords they compete for.
Absolutely.
Right? So is it the long tail, or is it one of the top keywords for your niche? So the competitors, once we know the competitors, we can go look at typically tens of thousands of keywords associated with those competitors. We work out of a very large data set of search results that is several billion, like over 10 billion data points that we use. And so out of that, so the important point here is that we do not use one publisher's data from GSC to go feed another publisher. I think that's something that's important to for our publishers to know. The data you share with us remains with you and does not percolate anywhere else. But there are data sets that you can license, that you can use, and from which you discover what's the relationship between the keywords, the competitors, and your website, how you're ranking and things like that. And so based on that very, very large data set, we do exactly what I described at scale, which is we find your competitors, we find keywords they rank for that you don't yet rank for, and then we suggest those.
And I think one of the things that I find, when we were walking through this a little bit yesterday, I was like, these are things that, I used to spend a lot of time doing way back in the day, building sites. And, the data that you were referring to, and it's the same data that, a lot of the different SEO tools and things like that will incorporate. And realistically, it's where a lot of the cost for SEO tools come from, because, it's not cheap. And I think one of the things that is nice is to be able to have all of this data, because, as a data scientist, it's like, what are you doing if you don't have any data? And so I think being able to have access as a publisher to not only just the data, but having somebody that has built in sort of the functions and the features of true analysis and research of this stuff, it saves an enormous amount of time, because you're able to sort of do something, the next step, I would say, with that competitor information, without having to actually go through, sort things through. I remember just CSV files that were sorted 1,000 times over in pivot tables. But from there, I guess the next step is then, so now I have potentially some topic ideas, right?
Right. And a note about that. Some publishers asked us, hey, I cannot download my list of topics. That's kind of intentional, because we're not trying to feed you yet another list of 500 ideas that you're going to spend 3 hours sifting through and try to cross-reference in 50 different ways. Those are good recommendations. They're adapted to your website. And every half hour or hour that you spend trying to decide between keyword 1 and keyword 2, there is one small competitor that is writing an article about both of them using Gen AI. So spend less time thinking or agonizing about what are the 5 keywords that you need to write to, because now it's cheap to produce content for those. So just focus on producing content.
And I think that, you and I were talking about this yesterday. One of the big shifts, I would say, in terms of enlightenment that I had working at Ezoic and working on this as a project, was when we started seeing lots and lots of sites worth of data. It becomes really obvious that the sites that are able to produce a lot of content, one of the biggest benefits that they have is that they immediately start getting data back on how that content is performing. And, you can, like you mentioned before, like if you spend 5 hours agonizing over what one topic to write, but instead, wrote 5 topics every hour,
Right.
It's something that you're going to have 5 data points immediately and 5 articles that you could potentially improve or do something with, because as smart as I like to think that I am, and I know a lot of the folks here that are on this call probably know a lot about their topics, but would readily admit sometimes you're just wrong, or sometimes you're surprised, or you don't know why they like that one but not this one.
And it's important to note that this equation has changed, right? A year ago, because it cost money to produce content. Let's say it costs you 30 to 50 bucks to produce, to either hire a copywriter or your time to write an article. Now it's a few cents, right? And so the agonizing about which topic you're going to take should not be a conversation. I'm going to do all of them because it doesn't cost so much to produce the content.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of that question of what would you do if you had a staff of 1,000 writers, if you had a data analysts that were just like waiting for you to be like, go do this.
Right.
And one of the things that I wanted to point out before we kind of move to this idea of like doing something with this content that we produce, the keyword difficulty. So you said something really interesting to me yesterday about which ones would be the best targets, and I wanted you to reiterate that, because
Sure.
I thought that was interesting.
And again, those are things that, like, lessons or learning that I took from Robert and Zach. We present just a single score potential that gives you the overall potential for this thing. And it's not a potential of how much money it's going to make you. It's a blend of how much money, how accessible it is for your website at this stage of the life cycle of your website, and how difficult it is to rank for that keyword. So this is the one single score, but it's a blend of how much traffic it might bring. And as you said, the keyword difficulty, the ideal is in the middle, because if it's too difficult, it's going to be too competitive and you're going to struggle to rank for it.
Sure.
If you don't rank, you don't get traffic. If it's too easy, like a long tail, yes, you're going to rank because you're the only one writing about it, but nobody's reading about it. So you have to find a good middle, right? And you can hover over it, and it tells you whether the keyword difficulty is low or high.
And I think that that's interesting too, because I think one of the really powerful things that Niche IQ brings is not only organizes all of this data and sorts through it and provides it through the lens of like what content, but it adds this layer that through Ezoic, we have this unique perspective that we can provide that includes something like revenue, where you're able to go, okay, because I've noticed over the years some of our larger publishers that actually employ data scientists or researchers or analysts, they'll spend a lot of time actually trying to figure out like, where am I going to balance that potential for traffic with revenue? And it's not an easy equation to solve. I'm going to be honest, I don't want to do the math on it. I'll let you do that. But it is a huge element here that you can't really get anywhere else. And I think that that's something that, hopefully our publishers will see the value and want to take advantage of. But we put the content out there. So now I've got all these ideas. Right. I'm not hand-wringing over what the subjects are going to be. But now I get the content out there. I don't want to just be another person that's polluting the internet with, content that's not unique or original. So I get it out there. I actually see that some of my articles start getting indexed like, what do I do now? How do I SEO them, if you will?
So I'll just do one last thing on topics, which is we produce new topics on a weekly basis.
Okay.
And so the goal is not for you to plan 3 months worth of content to write, because a month from now, competitors have written something else, right? So it's about, okay, what am I going to write about this week? Maybe 20 topics, right? I'm going to publish 20 articles this week. Just pick 20 topics, go write about them. Next week, the topics that are going to be produced are going to be taking into account search at large, what has driven traffic now to your website. Maybe there are some things that are starting to trend, some things that are losing momentum. So it's not about planning too far ahead, because you're in a very volatile and very dynamic environment.
It's such an interesting point, and something that I'll tie back to what you said earlier, which is, this this idea of evergreen content. Because I think for a long time the strategy was you wanted that long list and plan it out way ahead of time, because these were these targets. Abraham Lincoln is dead, and people want to know how. And guess what? Like, that information is not changing, so I can plan it out. But realistically, the nature of what content, even related to evergreen, what you would imagine subject matter, what people are interested in and related in relationship to that, actually is changing quite a bit. You think about, if you were to type in something like Elon Musk Twitter 6-7 years ago, you're going to probably find a lot of different types of content and information than you would now, because the history has changed, sort of like what people are interested in with that. So in that regard, I guess, as we're writing these topics and we're producing relevant content, how do we make sure that we capitalize on the opportunity that exists as it starts to get out there into the world?
So a natural tie to topics is Wordsmith, which is our brand new tool to help you develop content assisted with AI. So the idea here is to give you, as the editor-in-chief, control over the narrative of your content. So it's not, here is 3 keywords, write an article about cutting claws. It's about, I have a specific ideas how I want to do that. Or in this case, I'm on a website that talks about the Constitution and amendments and things like that. What I noticed is that I have no articles that target a younger audience. And so what I want to do is to write an article about the Fourth Amendment, and I want this article to be targeted toward kids. So that's an idea I had in the bus, or for the people who don't drive bus, maybe I was just sitting on a lounge. I was like, oh, that would be a good idea for an article, right? So I typed the outline on my cell phone. So here's the idea. I'm gonna just get an outline here. So the outline is typically created using, you have a heading, section heading, and then you have some information that describes what you want to do with that particular section. So I'm going to do that here.
And that's pretty common from the standpoint of, I know that's typically what we have. I mean,
writing
thousands
outlines
of publishers that will hand something like that off to a writer, and hopefully a writer that knows SEO, because that's normally the caveat, right? Where it's like, the quality of the writer and the knowledge of the subject is the thing that sort of like is the differentiator.
Right. So I give a title, I give my outline. I remember doing those outlines when I had to write essays in school, right? So it's just, think of Wordsmith as if it was a copywriter you're writing to. So the notes you put here are going to be the instructions you would get a copywriter, saying, okay, I want an article about this. First section, I want to cover this topic, and I want to do it with this tone and approach it this way. So I just gave the outline. I do continue. What it's done is taken every single section and basically created an individual section here. You can obviously reorder your sections if you want to, but and if you want, you can also provide a few keywords that are keywords that actually you would like to target with the article. and it's going to take those into account as it fleshes out the sections. So I start with the first section. You can see, you can specify how many words you want for the section. So in this case, maybe I want just 50 words. It's for the US Constitution, just a short introduction on US Constitution. Expand content is going to basically take those instructions and create a short outline. You can review it. If there is something you don't like, you can remove it, and then you move on to the next section.
So I want to just highlight this here, because if you're watching or tuning in today, or maybe listening to this recording, I would say if you're kind of distracted and doing two things at once, this would be the part that I would pay attention to, because I think this is pretty cool, and it definitely shortens it takes a lot of the manual work of basically executing on your ideas out of the equation. So I think this is pretty amazing, because sometimes by the time I'm done writing a paragraph, by the time I fix the typos, 10, 15 minutes has gone by.
Yep, that's true. Second paragraph, I'm just going to go quickly through that, right? Second section here is the actual Fourth Amendment. I'm not going to try to expand the content. I just keep it as is. Move on. Another article where I inform in the description here that I want it as if we were talking to an 8-year-old child. And so you can see it uses expressions like, oh, it's actually quite simple, right? You have special shield that protects you and your things from anyone who wants to search and take them. So you can see that it adapted the tone, right? Like you would expect your copywriter to do if you were telling him, write a paragraph about this way. So I'm not going to go beyond, but you just expand each section this way. Once you're done expanding all your sections, and as I said before, if you have something you don't like this section is getting too long, I'm going to scratch this particular paragraph. You just edit, it saves it behind the scene. You don't have to worry about it. Once you're done with all your sections, you go to the last, let me put that on the side here. The last set, you can review some statistics about your document. You can review the sections, have a last read, and then you're happy with it. You're going to export it. So it provides HTML. You copy it. You can go to your favorite CMS. You can paste it. You can see that it basically pastes the different sections as they were produced.
And I was an old school WordPress user, so I went straight into the code editing experience because it gave it to me in HTML yesterday. And then you said, no, just put it right into Gutenberg in the interface, and that way it'll put all the tag markups in there, and it sure does. So yeah, WordPress has evolved along with us there, and yeah, that's very easy.
So now I have basically my article. I've done a last read. I'm going to publish it, and then I take the link and I come back to Wordsmith, and I give back the URL of the article that was published, and this will allow us to track the ROI on the article. This is something that's not there yet, but we're going to help you basically balance, okay, it took me that much to produce that content, that much time or energy or money. What am I getting out of it? And be able to balance those two things, and give you this as an additional tool to basically pilot where you're taking your content and where you want to take your audience.
And I'll confess this here. So if you're listening, this is my confession to all of you. So for the longest time, big data analytics to me it's the pinnacle of like basically a data tool for a publisher, because it ties in your revenue to your traffic, and that's something that's very hard to do, even with something like Google Analytics. And long story. So big data analytics, being able to have all that information, I would always tell people, now you can finally get all the data, and you can actually figure out the ROI of your time and energy spent on SEO. Here's the problem, is that our publishers are probably pretty similar as to me, where it's like, I like that idea a lot. But then when you actually start spreadsheeting it out and you start going through and you remove this outlier, it just gets to the point where you're going, okay, by the time I'm done with this, am I going to be able to do anything with it? I mean, this is great, but like it's a lot of work, and I'm going to need to glean something from this. Do I feel like I'm going to do that? And this does it all for you just by copy and paste the URL in there after you've produced the content. And I think that is the ease of use that I was always hoping for, with something like big data analytics, and being able to evaluate those things, but being able to see that data, but then have this calculated for me. That's a big deal. I don't know that that's something that was really available any other way before now.
And the cherry on the cake is now you want to let people know about the great article that you wrote. So we have a media teaser, still work in progress. It's going to improve a little bit, give you different styles for different social media that you target. But here would be typically for, say, a LinkedIn or a Facebook post, a teaser that you can basically copy paste into your favorite social media platform
That's
announce the article you just wrote.
So what I really like about this is that it's an enclosed experience where I'm able to research, analyze, produce, and then publish my content, evaluate it, and even market it. So this is, it's one of the things that I kind of give people a hard time about every now and then, is that they spend a lot of time producing their content, but then they don't spend any time marketing it. At minimum, just being able to have some social accounts and things like that, it seems like a small prerequisite, but that stuff does take time, and being able to just generate sort of like some good posts, and then being able to, I know we're adding the feature to be able to post to each individual platform. Like that's value, because again, it's like this stuff like adds up quickly in terms of the time and energy that it takes.
And now that's a perfect segue for the other product I wanted to talk about, but I need to switch, so bear with me for a second. I'm just going to switch to another website. The segue, once you've produced all that content, and you're producing content faster now because you have AI assisted content generation, you want to see how it's performing, and you also want to catch up articles that lose momentum as fast as possible, because it's easier to remedy when you lose 2 or 3 positions in the front page than if you're now in position 17, you're trying to climb back up to the first page.
So this is sort of like, I always would tell people it's easier to get your existing content to do better than it is to, start from scratch. And I know that that's a component of some of the tools that we've got here, but, in real time, if you could catch those things as they were in decline or as they were on the rise, yeah, I mean, that would be ideal, right? So
I'm a big fan of having things. Did I pick the wrong one? No, I think I picked the right one. Yeah, okay. So Page Booster basically will use your Google Search Console, and you can do all of that manually, just like you can have long spreadsheets of topics that you're trying to pick. What we're going to do here is, on a weekly basis, look at the traffic that took place in the last 4 and 8 weeks, and kind of see how things evolved for different pages and different keywords. And the goal here is to find pages that lose momentum. What I mean by that is that sometime a page might stop having traffic to it, but it's perfectly fine. Just after Christmas, nobody is looking for wrapping paper, right? So your article about how to make nice gift wraps, nobody is looking for it. And that's not because all of a sudden your content went bad. It's just because people are not interested in it. So there is seasonality in content. The goal here is to catch not only loss of traffic, but also loss of rank of a number of keywords. And when those two things happen, there's a good there's correlation in those things, and we know that there is causation. If you rank lower, you get less traffic. That's a known causal link between the two things. So when we see that both happen, then we want to draw your attention to it and then give you an option to remedy. So it starts with the overall page of the 3 pages that perform the best, and this is by how much more traffic they got. and the pages that are losing traffic. And so this page here is about Romulus and Remus, and it's probably a source of concern. So I go into my page list and I find Romulus and Remus here. I lost, over the last 4 weeks, I lost 84 page views. Keep in mind that this is not a super large site, so you might have different numbers that are that represent a lot more revenue. Maybe 84 page views, some people would just not worry about it. But the fact is that you're losing both traffic and you're losing rank. You're just after the 10th rank now. And so the question is, well, what do I have to do with this page in order to improve it? And so what we do is we give you a list of the keywords that had traffic drop and traffic increase. And so based on that, you can see what your audience was looking for, and maybe who decided with those keywords to click on another result. If you didn't get the traffic, they probably clicked on someone else. So you can take this and then use another tool that we're not going to demo today, but is in the oven. It's getting baked, called Additive AI, which basically does what Wordsmith does for new content. It helps you enhance existing content using generative AI.
You know, back in the day, I would have companies that would reach out to me and they'd want me to do SEO consulting, and I'd usually pick up a couple hours of work before Christmas, buy everybody really nice gifts, you know, and that's what they would have me do. Is they would, you know, like that was always my strategy to help the fastest, which is let's go find the old articles that are worth it, and then let's go fix them up. And yeah, being able to sort of here are those ones, and here's what you should fix, and then here's some stuff to fix it, and here's some media. Yeah, I don't know what I would have done back in the day. I would have not been able to do that because it would have, or I would have had to use that tool, because this is fundamentally what I think. If you talk to good SEOs and publishers that have been, you know, successful in building, you know, content strategies that grow in organic search traffic, this is what they're doing, right? Like they're doing analysis, they're doing research, they're writing about these topics, they're making sure they cover the right subjects, and then when they're going in, they're trying to identify what are the articles that I have that are at risk, what are the ones that are maybe on the rise that I can maybe do something about. And I know that personally, I've had to be on calls with publishers for long periods of time where there's guessing that's going on about why am I gaining traffic? Why am I losing traffic? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm always like banging my head against the wall, none of the people on this call, by the way, they're all super smart. And I'm sure that they've never made a mistake like this before. But the thing is that, you know, you start to panic sometimes if you see your traffic go up or down and you look at, you know, your Google Analytics. But, you know, a lot of these answers are in Search Console. And when I was kind of discussing this with you yesterday, you said, but by the time you get to, you know,
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
And it's cumbersome. And you're going to do it for your top 3 pages and the top 15 keywords. And now you've sunken an hour there, right?
Yes, exactly.
And we do it for your hundreds of pages that drive traffic and for thousands of keywords that drove traffic to your site over the past 4 to 8 weeks. So we do it at scale so that you don't have to. And what we want to do is to give you actionable information. Now, whether you act on that or not, you're totally in control. But we don't want you to waste time getting to the point where you have the information you can act on. We're trying to give it to you.
And what I like about all the different features of Niche IQ is that it is a full suite. It's the majority of SEO tools that are popular today, and some that realistically don't even exist. And it also does the job that you need to do with them. And then it sort of like, it leaves it to our users then to be able to say, okay, well, I have an opinionated implementation of this, or I have an idea of where I'd like to take this, or I actually want to change this slightly because I think this will work a little bit better. And that's exactly what you would want as sort of like the executive of, you know, your website, is to be able to not have to do some of the painstaking work, the hour in Search Console, the hour sort of like picking through topics and ideas. And I love that sends send you directly to the SERP, because it's the other thing that I always tell publishers, which is like, let's look at the search results. Let's figure out, like, is the answers like looking us straight in the face? I told you yesterday about a publisher that used to rank #1 for "Is it going to rain today?" And it didn't take very long to look at the SERP to figure out why that article didn't rank anymore, and this was maybe 10 years ago. But I think, I think
add a video about Romulus and Remus, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Yep. Stop sharing. Yep. There we go.
And so that sort of like kind of winds out our like review of our kind of closer look at Niche IQ. And I know one other thing that we wanted to demonstrate is just how easy it is to send content from Niche IQ to Writio. It's one of the things that we previewed yesterday in our conversations about how we provide websites with a full staff stack. This idea that AI should allow our publishers. You mentioned content going to, the cost of producing content going to zero, and that allows the threats of new entry. Yeah. But all of you have this huge advantage of knowing how to create content, how to run a website. And that unique advantage should allow you to outpace, and realistically, your experience really does matter in this case. So equipping publishers with a staff that can help them execute faster, competition should be worried about them. And I think that one of the things that I would highlight with this is that with something like Niche IQ, you really get the full staff of, I don't want to say it, I'll let you say it, but are you essentially getting like the, I guess, capabilities that you would get from hiring a data scientist or a research team?
I think you get the methods that are used underneath are data science methods, and the practices and approaches are taken from the best SEO specialists I know. So that's what you get there. I'm sure there are a number of publishers who feel they know better, and they've been exposed to many of the tools that give them so many numbers that they feel comfortable with that. And it makes me think of people who are day traders. They're just comfortable with a whole bunch of numbers, right? And then there's the rest of us who do buy and hold, or they have maybe simpler tools, but they can still build wealth. And I think that's a little bit what we're building here. We're building simple tools. They have safeguards around them. They might not be the sharpest knife in the tool, but the fact that they do things at scale might beat people who do things manually, just because we can do it at scale.
And I think one of the things that's the biggest benefit here is that even if you had, you spent $1,000 and you go out and you get all the different tools that allow you to do these things, on top of that, you're still going to have to do each of those jobs individually. And even if some of them have reproducible AI that's helping with offloading some of it, none of it is built around the publishing process. Because if you look at a lot of the ways that SEO tools and technologies are built, they're built for advertisers or marketing websites or B2B businesses, or you name it. And being able to have something that is doing all of these jobs specifically through the lens of a publisher, a content site, a niche site, I think that these things make it really easy to kind of like generate articles quickly that are your ideas that still have your DNA in them. And I think that that's one of the biggest benefits of this approach is that I don't think anybody on this call, even the most sort of cynical of us, really wants to live in a world where there's no human content. I think that humans are still pretty great and that we can still make pretty great content, but we don't necessarily have to put our hands on a keyboard for a couple hours to do that all the time. And I think that pairs really well with Writio. So you showed us Wordsmith. Writio is sort of the full automation of that, and we talked a little bit yesterday about what that integration might look like. And we can show you just briefly if you want to screen share again, Gerald. We can just show people maybe inside of Niche IQ exactly where they could connect a Writio account, which there's a free trial available for Writio that I think it'll actually prompt you if you're if you want to give it a try inside of
I'll
Ezoic.
wait the cue from our. Okay, so give me just a sec. So here's radio.
So yeah, if you go back when you're in topic suggestions, there's a little radio logo. It's that little purple W there, and once you click on it, it'll prompt you to connect your radio account, and then next time you go in, if you go over to the tab on your left, that right tab, or yeah, on your left, the right tab sounds like an oxymoron, but you'll notice that whatever topic that you've picked out of topic suggestions inside of Niche IQ, it's now there inside of radio, and you can queue them up. You can have a cadence or a schedule in which you want to approach kind of like writing or having it automate these. But radio does the whole job. It'll automate writing, publishing, all that kind of stuff, but it still gives you that sort of granular control that I think people saw inside of Niche IQ as well. So I think these tools can pair together really well, but they don't necessarily have to. And I think I talked to somebody last week and said, I think 50% of publishers are going to really want to take a Niche IQ approach where it's like even if it's not taking them a lot of time, at every level, they sort of want to be able to exercise their discernment. And then you have another 50% of publishers that are like, how do I automate this in the most intelligent way possible so that this is done, with sort of my seal of approval. It's two types of leadership, if you will, like the sort of hands-on versus hands-off approach. And that's what I like about this. And we don't have to demonstrate much further than that. We'll have more detailed and quicker run-throughs of some of the different products that either we mentioned or referenced here today, available later this week. But hopefully, everyone has got a chance to kind of, see the showcase of what I think it's the best of breed SEO tool for publishers. And I guess would you have anything to add to that, Jordan?
If I could give a suggestion to publishers, learn to prompt. Prompting is going to be, you're now stepping up to be a manager of AI agents. And so you need to learn to talk to them because they're going to be your staff, or they're going to be at least part of your staff. And if you don't do that, I don't want to be gloomy, but if you don't do that, some other publishers who do that will become big competitors to yours.
And I can tell you that from our perspective, thinking about the best interests of our publishers and how do we put them in position to succeed, all of you, the thing that we think about quite a bit with this is how do we make sure that we help eliminate sort of the I guess the lack of certainty that you would feel about, am I doing the right things? And I think one of the elements of that is giving you the tools to be able to not have to decide between doing one thing or the other, but allowing you the freedom to be able to do a lot of things. And I think that's sort of, it's baked into a lot of the elements that you saw today. But, I want to go back to the prompting thing real quick before we finish, because you mentioned something to me yesterday that I thought was very interesting. And it was the actor, I forget.
Yeah, that was the actor critique. So two things about that. The first thing is, we talked about two things. The first thing we talked about was when you do prompting and you ask an AI to do something, you can also, the actor critique model is a model where first you asked generative AI, okay, generate a 300 words article on how to cut dog claws. And then the critique part is you go back to the AI and you say, here's an article about how to cut claws. Can you look at it and make a few suggestions of things you think are missing? And it's going to come up with a few suggestions. And so this notion of using AI to criticize AI's work is very, very important. When you build when you look at a particular article and you try to figure out what your competitors are doing, insert one extra question to ChatGPT, which is, what is relevant to the article I have that is not covered by my competitors? That's the look for what is not there, not always just what's there, right? Evergreen is basically, let me just go replicate, I exaggerate, but let me just cover the topic that's already covered by other people. That's evergreen. The question now is, okay, how can I cover it in a way that's not been yet covered?
I love that, because it's a very easy and practical sort of like approach. And I think that from our standpoint, looking at it through a publisher lens, it's very actionable and it makes a lot of sense. But it's one of those things that you get exponential work out of the AI by having it sort of challenge itself and ask itself sort of like the questions of evaluation. And that through the knowledge and expertise that you have as a publisher, you can maybe pick out what are the things that I need it to sort of like glean out of this, or what can I get it to sort of evaluate to help me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
And I think that we'll leave it there today. And hopefully all of you had a chance to go through this. And if maybe you had other things going on, you didn't get a close look, don't worry. It was recorded. You'll get a copy of it. You can also go to ezoic.com/customer-week-2023. I'm sure you've got some emails from us with that link in there as well. And you can review all the different recordings and resources that we have this week. We'll put together a speed cut of some of the things that Gerald went through today inside of Niche IQ, so you can kind of see them back to back and hear him walk through it. And then we'll do the same thing later this week with Radio as well, showing that connection, that integration. And hopefully you'll have a chance to join me again tomorrow. I'll be with Jeff Bernard, our Director of Publisher Success, and we'll be talking a little bit more about levels and about services and how we've organized, basically our full suite of offering, both, technology, obviously you're hearing about today, but also the services that we're able to provide our publishers to help you navigate the future of publishing to the web, which I still think that we're in the golden age of publishing. So I'm very optimistic about the future and very optimistic for our publishers. Gerald, thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler.
And thank you to all of our customers for tuning in.